Welcome to Real Nerds Podcast, unofficially the official podcast at Denver Comic Con 2014 and beyond. You know, it's a great town, Telluride. And in October, in Telluride, they have their horror show where you can see some great movies and talk to some great filmmakers like we did. So here's an exclusive interview with said filmmaker. Welcome to Real Nerds Podcast at Telluride Horror 2013. I am Ryan, James, and Brad, and we have the honor with sitting with visual effects awesome dude, Phil Tippett. Thanks for coming on our show, sir.
My pleasure.
So you're at Telluride this year, kind of have a passion project here. It's called Mad God that I just got out of, and it's amazing. Do you mind telling everybody what Mad God is about and how it came around? Well,
Mad God kind of defies description, and I'm not, I look at it a little bit more like instead of explanatory filmmaking that makes sense of itself, and creating a narrative that's maybe a little bit more like certain forms of writing, where the audience members themselves complete the thing. A lot of the ideas in it are kind of stolen from dreams, and the imagery is. It's not futuristic. It's very iconic. All of the objects and things are like very understandable in terms of our everyday experience, but they're put together in a way that is kind of broken and reconfigured. A little bit like surrealistic. I wouldn't call it surrealistic, but it's using more of like an unconscious frame of reference to build things with.
It comes across a lot like storytelling through world building, which I think is what is so engrossing about it, is that it drops you into this place, and because they don't tell you anything, or you don't tell us anything, I should say, that you're soaking in everything as much as you can, because you're trying to figure out exactly what, and then like you said in your Q&A afterwards, then you move on so quickly that it just keeps us running to keep up. It's fascinating, and it's just absolutely gorgeous.
I was kind of thinking, that the final form of the thing is the memory of it after you watch it. How that's what the experience really is. It's not the film. The film is just the way to get there.
And is that because you got the idea from a dream? Because you said that as well. So when you dream, you think about your dream prior, and then it's an interpretation of what you previously thought you were dreaming of?
Yeah, I mean, none of the Mad God imagery has come from a dream. It's just influenced by that kind of experience. I was just looking for another way of developing a narrative. In a lot of ways, like breaking a lot of the rules that I have in my day job, where in conventional theatrical cinema, there are like so many rules about continuity and editing and how long you can let something play, and they're arbitrary rules. They're just a convention that's part of the nomenclature of the film language of the day, and there's a lot of other stuff that you can do with it. And so I chose a path that I just hadn't seen anybody else on, because I was kind of curious about it.
And you said that you were archiving the footage, and that your fellow employees kind of egged you on to do it. Did you lose all interest of it originally, and they're the ones who pushed you? Or did you always have it in your back burner that you were going to do it?
No, I totally thought it was dead. I thought that after I had initially shot, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, 20 years ago on 35 millimeter film, a number of contingent events, entered into my life that took all my effort. Like I was saying, like raising kids and making the transition from photographic to digital imagery, it took a tremendous amount of effort. And it just so happened that I was archiving the material, and these guys stepped in and said, hey, we'll donate our time and help if you want to. I mean, their interest was more in a project that was about making things, and using saws and hammers and glue and stuff like that to, build pictures with.
So you had to learn digital, correct? Or did you already have kind of know how to do it from your years as a special effects artist?
Yeah, I am probably the stupidest person in my studio in regard to digital technology. I mean, I have no interest in it. It's too complicated, and there are too many things, and I don't personally like the way it looks. But there are a lot better people than me that do that stuff and can make stuff look better. And so, I mean, just in the genesis of my career, at a certain point, it just was happening about the time the digital took over. I kind of been kicked upstairs. So I didn't do any hands-on work anyway. It was more, working with production teams, getting productions in place, going out and shooting, making sure all the material was shot right, and then coming back and putting things in place for the crews to put it together.
So how was a learning crew then for the guys who didn't know how to do the physical things with saws and hammers and stop motion? Did they get it really fast, or was it a long process where you became a teacher?
Well, most of the people that I took, I made a few mistakes early on because I would go give talks and people would want to volunteer. And so initially I was pretty open about who could come and do things. The thing is, you have to find people that are already at a certain skill level. Otherwise, it's just, I have a lot of heavy lifting work that I need. I need a lot of the same thing built. But you got to be really careful doing that. Bringing people that don't, at a certain point I had to back off from keeping the invitation open to people that had never worked with tools before, because it was like giving razor blades to 4-year-olds. and I thought better of it. So everybody that's come on has a certain skill set and ability, that I'm pretty aware of before they engage.
One of the things I was really fascinated by in your presentation was you said that when the guys on your team saw what you'd done, they were really excited about, like you just said, getting to work on that stuff. What do you think it is about models and all that sort of practical effects that tend to be like a passion project for people? And I think it's true even on the audience's side, where a couple years ago, Duncan Jones's Moon got a lot of praise because all the shots on the moon were all practical model effects. Is there something about those visual effects being tactile that people just feel like they understand what a labor of love it is more than they do? CG animators are passionate and really talented too, but is there something where we can connect with it easier?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, one, you get for free when you shoot an object, you're photographically documenting it as opposed to artificially reconstructing it. So there is, even though it's going through another medium, it's a representation of a real thing, not a virtual thing. And by virtue of that fact, depending upon how you build your thing, let me back up. When you approach building things digitally, you have to work from a position of intention. And usually there's a lot of stuff, at least for theatrical films, a big pre-design thing where you get a whole lot of input, and then some very specific moves to make the stuff quote unquote look real. But if you work with objects, they're already real. So it's just a matter of skill and finish that you actually put on the models to do things. And another aspect of working with things is that as opposed to working, from an intention towards an objective, objects tell you a lot about what they want to be. So there's a different kind of a dialogue in terms of making things. That literally is a dialogue between the thing that you're making and the process that you're using. And a lot of things can change. I mean, most of the great ideas you get that come from accidents, and accidents you kind of have to blunder into.
And it's hard to fail into an accident when you're doing CG
Digitally, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, in your film Mad God, I mean, it's really, feels like you can touch it, and it's so open for interpretation. I kept on trying to put together what the Mad God meant, and when he was descending into the pit or whatever it was, I saw that huge statue. I kept on waiting for it to come out and get them, and then it's just building and building to something else. And you said in your presentation you want people to think back to what they had, and you mentioned the character's name was the Assassin, but it looked like he was rescuing the monster when he opened the door and it looked at him. Is it all open for interpretation, or is there an ending in sight, or how's it going?
It was constructed to work, more like dreams work, and keep it very open to interpretation. I gave a talk to some film students up in Boulder earlier in the year, and we did a screening and had a pretty big audience. And some of the people in the audience actually got irate that they asked me what it meant. And I turned it around and I said, "What does it mean to you?" And they thought I was messing with them. And they had like some specific ideas. And the way I tried to explain it was that I kind of I have like a 3D or a sculptural mind, and I think in 3D in terms of things, but then I also think on a conceptual level mentally, which are two totally different animals. And I looked at the object of Mad God as kind of like being a receptacle or a vase or something like that people could put interpretations into and come out of it. A lot, writers do it all the time. I mean, the person that writes the book is the reader, and puts it together. So it's like more using those kind of ideas or conventions.
Sorry, I didn't
Yeah. I was waiting for him. He's like, I thought he was going to ask something really profound, but then nothing came out. So do you mind if we go back and talk about how you got into film and what piqued your interest originally in film?
I was just a kid that liked, movies, in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. And, was a big fan of, Ray Harryhausen's movies and all of that stuff. And just kind of did it and got to a certain level of proficiency and was able to meet a number of people that mentored me, that helped me on my way, and it just one thing led to the next. The other thing was nobody was doing this kind of stuff, so if you had a certain level of proficiency and people wanted a robot or a dinosaur or whatnot, there weren't that many places to go to, so it was easy to get hired.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's one of the stories you hear a lot about Star Wars, is that, when all those... There was so much weight left on the effect shots, and at the time it seems like nobody really knew what that was going to look like or how it was going to work or how to do it. And yet you guys ended up coming out with some of the most amazing stuff, stuff that was inspiring to generations of kids.
Well, the funny thing about that is, all of that stuff was based on approaches that had been, figured out in the 20s and 30s, right. Pretty much. And we were all like students of that kind of work, and the studios had forgotten about it. They had disbanded all their visual effects departments. And slowly over the years, as the studios have gone from these places that were owned by the Jack Warners or the mayors, or and have become more corporatized. The studios have forgotten how to make movies. There's a changeover on the business side, and history is forgotten. So when a Lucas and a Spielberg come back and go like, "Hey, there was a component of all these things that were really successful that we can come back and put a new coat of paint on." I mean, there were certain technological developments. I mean, I think that's the way to look at it, that nothing pretty much anywhere, and certainly in cinema, changes really until the technology changes, and then people, put sound in their movies and color on their movies, and 3D on their movies, and on the Star Wars movies, the motion control technology was the single most important kind of a thing to start to get what was previously kind of chattery, jittery looking stuff for B movies to integrate more into live action for what were now becoming the A movies that had like, you know, $10 and $20 million budgets, as opposed to the $2 or $3 million budgets the lower budget Ray Harryhausen movies had.
Did you know at the time when you were working on Star Wars that it would be the phenomenon it became? Did you feel a special thing?
No, the way that we looked at it when we got hired onto it, we got hired to do a number of inserts to replace material that was shot in England for the Cantina, and that's where George realized that you know, we were doing stop motion as well. It all kind of just flowed together magically, you know, somehow. You know, we just didn't. It was as though no one had to try to do anything. And George screened Star Wars for us, you know, before we started working on these things, and we were big fans of TH, you know, X, and you know, George was a really terrific director, and so he would screen the cantina scene or the chess scene, and we'd go like, wow, hey, that's exactly the kind of movie we always wanted to work on, and really had fun doing all that stuff. And then we went to the cast and crew screening of it, and we were as bowled over as anybody else when it was all together.
Really cool. And then you also won an Academy Award shortly after that for another Star Wars, correct?
For Jedi, yeah.
For Jedi, yeah. And to me, that's so cool because I'm sitting with an Oscar winner, one. And two, what do you think, was that an Oscar for just Jedi, or do you think it was kind of like they gave it to you because how great of a job you guys did throughout the whole trilogy? And
well, there are rules at the Academy about that stuff, you know. But how I got that was yeah, you're kind of on the right track. I mean, it was actually George worked with the Academy to get one more guy on the, you know, I did a lot of work for him, and so he said, you know, Phil should get an Oscar. Well, only 3 people can get it. Well, what if 4 people can get it? And now 8 people can get it.
So. Yeah. Well, the teams are, you know, a whole lot more than twice as big as they were then. So that's funny.
You also worked on the Temple of Doom, which is kind of the darker Indiana Jones, but it's actually my favorite Indiana Jones movie. And what scenes did you work on there, and what were the challenges of working with Indiana?
I just kind of came in as you know, to help Dennis Mirren out, who was supervising the show. So I helped him get the stuff together for the minecart chase, and helped him rig and shoot the thing where the guy's being lowered into the lava.
Oh, sweet.
That's the only stuff I've worked on.
What is your most what are you most proud of in your career when you look back, or is it always something new that you're constantly working on?
No, it's, you know, I think, you know, over like a career that like spans like 30 years, you look back on the you know, teams of people that you've worked with. Though that's the most resonant, you know, of, you know, you had a great time making this thing, and it turned out not to be a piece of crap. And when we went, Kathy Kennedy invited Dennis and I down once the first answer print was struck, down to Amblin, and she screened Jurassic Park. It was just like the 4 of us, and when it was over, she goes like, "What did you think?" And we went like, "It's not terrible." And she went like, "That's exactly what I thought." I mean, because you're working with so many disparate parts, you know, that until like, you know, you get it to a certain point in an editorial that you just keep your fingers crossed. And there's so many things that I've worked on that you think is going to have potential, and just like dies a terrible death.
So also, because you work with so many things and you do just the visual effects, you have to rely, I guess, a lot on the editor and the director to bring it all together, or does your effects won't work correctly?
Well, in the context that works, it's a partnership. You know, everybody has their job, and the best directors are the most inclusive ones, and editors. I mean, everything, all costumers, you know, if everybody, you know, sometimes you get on bad crews where everybody's like territorial and wants to try and, you know, be in charge and have control issues. But generally, if you have like a strong director that's very inclusive, you're invited in to play. What would be good? What would be fun? Hey, what if we did this? Oh, that's a good idea. We should do that.
Does that make working on something like Mad God feel daunting, or does it make it feel freeing that
Mad
you never
God's
have...
a totally different animal, because it's not driven by a schedule or a lot of money. So that it takes it out of that sphere. I mean, it gets very stressful working on some of the other things because there's always a release date and a finite amount of money, and there's always never enough money.
Do you ever have to compromise a vision because of a release date then on something they want to do, or are you able to get what you want out of it?
Yeah. Well, usually by that point, for me, it's like the film has gone south by for reasons that are beyond your control. It's not so much of a personal vision. It's more of an architectonic process of like you do this, 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 you do this. You build everything up, and you do it with a plan. And sometimes that plan blows up, and then you have to like recalculate and figure out a different way of going about doing it.
Do you have a favorite kind of movie you like to work on? Because you've done so many different ones, from RoboCop to Indiana Jones to Star Wars to Mad God. Do you have a certain vision you like to have? Do you like them darker? Do you like them to be a little more light? Or is it just whatever is...
I'm pretty omnivorous. I'm kind of done, with it. I don't like working on movies anymore that much. It's boring.
Really?
So, well, they've in the olden days when I worked with this guy, it was the way I look at it is or look back at it is there was all that stuff that led up to Jurassic Park and Starship Troopers, and then there's like this precipitous fall off where things just started looking like crap.
Yeah,
and they still do. I went to see Gravity last week, which was phenomenal, and all of the trailers that they ran for it with The Hobbit and Thor. I mean, it just all the visual effects stuff just looks like it was just like the same giant cauldron of oatmeal that had been mixed together over and over and over. It's corporatized, processed, homogenized, franchise bullshit for the masses, and it's tedious.
Well, I think it feels like, as an audience member, it feels like people have sort of forgotten that, they think that CG can just do everything, and what we end up getting the sense of is that, like, when everything is CG, we know none of it is real. And what's really great about your Starship Troopers and your Dragon Hearts and things like that is that even when they started introducing CG, and Jurassic Park is this way too, the close-ups, the places where we really needed detail, where we really needed things to be tactile, were all still practical. Jurassic Park doesn't work because the CG is like, oh man, it was so impressive. It works because Steven Spielberg knew, like, okay, when the T-Rex gets close, I want it to have that eyeball that moves the way that E.T.'s eye moves.
Well, and Steven was a child that grew up loving that stuff.
Yeah.
And so he knew, same thing with Paul. They were students of film, and they genuinely loved all of that stuff. And the fish stinks from the head on down, as they say, and that makes, everybody else's work, up to a certain level. But when, these days the studio arbitrarily hires the 24-year-old Argentinian video, guy, so they can beat him up, that's a fucked up process.
Yeah, I mean, I agree too, because something like World War Z, where they have CGI zombies running around, I think is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Where something like Mad God, where when I see him descending and those walls, I feel like I can touch him, I think has a more profound effect on me than CGI like puppets flying around the screen.
I've I didn't hate World War Z.
Oh, I didn't. No, I didn't
me.
either. I don't think the movie's bad. I just think that those parts make it bad.
Yeah.
Like they're unnecessary.
Well, who is it? It was Siskel or Ebert said something like at some point in time, like stop motion, computer graphics looks real but feels fake, and stop motion miniature looks fake but feels real.
Yeah.
That kind of.
I was just gonna say because like all that stuff in World War Z is really impressive, and you look at it and you go, oh yeah. As much as it may look real, visually, I don't take anything home with me. Whereas when something is like something like Mad God, where I kind of want to just go back and pause it every now and then, just stare at the corners of the screen and see what I'm missing. Like that's the stuff that you carry.
Well,
with you.
the times were different, so the teams that you worked with were much smaller. So if we were reviewing shots, it would be like, like on Troopers, it would be John and Mark Goldblatt and the editor and Paul and me. It would be like 4 guys in a room going like, here's what we should do. And now it's not like that. It gets like run up the food chain. There's so many people that help you make your movie. And generally the first thing that they say is we want it to be real, which is my indication of meeting with somebody that doesn't have an education at all. Because I don't know if anybody bothered telling anybody before, but movies are pretend. And it's not about making things look real. It's making things look viscerally dynamic and really making them look good. And so I mean, that's always. And then the studios got into this thing where. In the olden days, producers knew what visual effects were, but subsequently they lost that skill, and they would hire middle managers called visual effects supervisors that work for the studios. And generally these people are middle managers. And there's this competition that it's got engendered over the last 15 or 20 years, where when you go into a review, what the review is about is find what's wrong with the shot, and it becomes a game. And so there's always something wrong with the shot because everything's subjective, and you can micromanage it down to a pixel, and that's what can be wrong with the shot. And we can do like 500 takes digitally now because we're redoing it, and it gets to a point where these guys don't know how to manage people. If you manage artists, what you do is you encourage them. But if you are looking for what's wrong with what they do, what you get is like, okay, lady, where do you want your sofa? You want it over there? Or you want it over there? I don't give a fuck. I'll put it wherever you want it. But it's creative mismanagement. And that's part of the whole corporate modality. And the fish stinks from the head on down. And messed it up. But in the day, I was just talking to Dennis about this particular problem. Was we never thought about what was wrong with the shots. We only thought about, hey, what'll make it better.
And you also mentioned that in your presentation too, that as a director, for an artist, you tell them, okay, they start here, they jump a fence, and then they land, and you can tell in Mad God, it's just so cool. It's just so much to absorb because you're not hampering them down.
Well, and part of it is your own mental preservation. You're an idiot if you have control issues and you have to micromanage everything. It's just, that just means you're psychotic on a certain level. But if you can still embrace that childlike thing, what you're looking for, you're just looking to be amazed. And the job of directing a lot of times is just giving people guidelines and then wanting to be amazed by what they do and just see it and go like, that is really cool. I would have never thought to do that in a million years.
How'd you like working with Paul Verhoeven?
I really liked it a lot. No,
cool.
We got along really well. No,
very cool.
We had the Vulcan mind meld thing going, and we'd be working on something, and we would be drawing. Yeah, okay, well, the camera's over here, and the thing's over here, and this is over here, and this, and then, okay, fine, we know what we're doing, yeah. We throw, the page down, and, the first AD would come up and go, you guys are fucking with us, right? It's just like a bunch of scribbles. But we knew what we're doing.
So Then I'll follow that up. So what's it like then working with Steven Spielberg? Is he seems like, I mean, this is probably just a fanboy of me, but when I watch him, I'm like, oh, he's like my uncle when he tells me about how they made movies and stuff. Does he direct the same way, or is he a really hardcore director and has shots planned out really well?
Oh, the planning for both is just, I mean, it goes back to like Hitchcock kind of stuff. It's like everything is planned because everything has to get budgeted. So, everything is totally worked out. But, things come up, like on the set, where it's like, oh, hey, wow, the lawyer in the script and the storyboard, he just gets railroaded by the Tyrannosaurus. What if we tilted the camera up and you got to see the Tyrannosaurus eat the guy? And Steve will go like, yeah, let's shoot that. And Kathy will go like, we're not budgeted for that. And it's like, well, we can shoot it. and then it ends up in the movie. So.
Oh, man.
Oh, that's fun. So, so what's it like working with George Lucas?
It was great working with George. I mean, all of those guys were, kind of my directorial ideals. I mean, they were the ones, I didn't know anything about working in movies. And so they were kind of chronologically the first people that I met that were, very astute, well-studied filmmakers. And, a lot of it, when things work, you do have this kind of, telepathy. And there's a surprisingly little amount of actual discussion about how deep things are. It's like it's like working in an ensemble. You're playing off of other people, and know where they're, how far away you are from them or how close you can get. And so they were all, very good memories.
Very cool. And you also directed a few films. Is it easy to go from visual effects to directing? Because directing obviously is such a visual medium as well and a profession. Or did you have to rethink how you did things as well?
I didn't. I never really imagined myself as a director. I had this other fantasy of being a filmmaker that wasn't necessarily a director. But I tried to get a bunch of things going. And I think John made me direct something because I think he was tired of listening to me bellyache about directors. And it was a really great experience. I had a lot of fun doing it, and nothing ever really came of it. But it's a really tough racket to be in. And there's up at my local market, there was a kid that was going to film school, and he asked me what he thought he should major in. And I'm like, you don't know? I mean, what? You should know that, the answer to that question. I can't tell you. And he said, well, I was interested. I was thinking maybe about directing. Can you give me advice about directing? And I'm like, hell yeah, I can give you advice about directing. It's like, here's what you do. You stay working in this store for another 3 or 4 years. You buy yourself 3 really nice suits, and you move to either Sacramento or Washington, D.C. You get your job as like, what do they call them, an intern or a Monica Lewinsky type of a thing. Yeah. And you work in that milieu for 3 years. During that 3 years, you can only eat cat food. That's all you can eat is cat food. But if you make it to the end of that first 3-year period, you have to start lacing into the cat food human feces until at the end of that 3rd-year period, if you're able to eat an entire human turd, then you could be a director in Hollywood. And I tell that to all my director friends, and they go, fucking A, Bubba. I don't know. Would you disagree?
For those of you listening at home, producer John Davis just walked into our set, and I'm trying not to freak out right now. I'm staying focused. So, Mad God Part 2 is being funded on Kickstarter, correct?
It will be. I haven't started one yet.
And did you have a timetable for that, or is it just whenever you get around to it?
No, I'm hoping to have that done by the end of next year, and then Chapter 3 by the end of the following year.
And is
maybe sooner.
How long is it before Mad God Part 1 is completely finished?
November, December.
And Is there a place we're going to be able to watch it around that time, or how are we going to?
It'll be in a bunch of film festivals, and a bunch of people that participated in the Kickstarter get Blu-rays of it. And then I'm looking at talking to different people about theatrical distribution and things like that.
How many parts do you think it's going to be?
I have no idea.
Okay, that's what I expected. Very cool.
Well, what I'm kind of thinking of at the moment is I've got these 3 chapters that are pretty intact, but in some ways, like the way I'm thinking about it is a little bit like I don't know what I'm talking about because I never played video games, but the structure is such that I've got places where I can go into the existing narrative, like with a wedge, and like open it up, and the thing will still play. So it'll come down to when things start looking crappy and I run out of ideas, and then I'll stop.
You had a little teaser for what's happening next, and the monster where you're showing the behind the scenes of it. How long did it take to build that monster?
It took a long time because like most things, that is a little bit interesting because it was like, how do you make a monster? And you look at a lot of the stuff that's out there right now of people that design monsters, and it's pretty much kind of sort of the same thing, but what is evocatively a horror that comes from your unconscious. And so I tried a whole bunch of things, and a bunch of things didn't work, and I just kept building it and tearing it down and building it and tearing it down, used a bunch of conventional materials and didn't like how it worked, and ended up just stumbling across, I think what I ended up using is mostly insulation foam for like doors, houses. I just eventually stumbled on the right material until things started looking right.
I couldn't do that. How many wires were on that monster? I can't. It was mind blowing when I was watching.
I never counted. Again, I don't think. It's just a matter of getting stuff together. And this look like it'll work. This could work, and you build it up and you get stuff put together and take it down and put it back together. And just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until, like, at a certain point you go like, I'm done.
And how many frames does it take for like the movements for that monster too? Because it was coming like right at the assassin, and he was moving too. I guess you just told me you don't count, but like it's just
a complicated shot like that. There were like 5 guys that were working on it.
Wow.
So there was Chuck Duke was animating the foreground guy, Tom Gibbons, Chuck and Tom are really great stop motion animators that go back a long time. Then we have like a kid that was one of the guys was teaching that was going to a local college, did some other stuff, and there was another guy in the back. So.
And that has to be super complicated too, because the character in the front has to move at the same time as the one in the back, correct? Or it doesn't match up. Is that a challenging thing to do when you're filming, and when you go back and look at it, you realize you missed something?
No, because you stay in touch. I mean, again, it's like doing a dance in like super slow time, and so you've kind of worked out what you're going to do in terms of the choreography. And then as you come, closer and closer and closer together to the contact, you're in a lot more contact with each other. Like in 10 frames, I'm going to be here. 12 frames here, and so you can help anticipate.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mr. Tippett, thank you for stopping by and talking to us, and thank you for showing Mad God.
Yeah,
it was really awesome.
I'm so excited to see more of it.
And so make sure you check out Kickstarter so you can chip in on Chapter 2. Is there a place we can go online right now and check out your other work?
Just Tippett Studio website. Yeah.
Cool.
Tippett Studio website.
Cool.
Thank you so much
for
taking time. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Ted, of Telluride Horror Show, the Sheridan Opera House, for letting us set up in their wonderful place. Until next year, bye. Visit our website, realnerdspodcast.com. You can tweet us at real_nerds. You can email us even, realnerds@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook. Hey, stream us on Stitcher. You want to call us? 720-6nerds5. and download us on iTunes. Just search Real Nerds. Thank you, Joe Kempter, for the wonderful voiceover, and also Spark Mandrill for the wonderful late-night jazz smooth sounds of movies. You can find him on SoundCloud. This has been a Nebulous Visions production.